You're listening to Catholic Chicago on WNDZ 750 AM. During the next hour, the Archdiocese of Chicago brings you programs about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Welcome to Catholic Chicago.
Welcome to On the Way from the Office for Evangelization and Missionary Discipleship from the Archdiocese of Chicago. I am Beth White, your co-host this morning, and I have with me Jen Delvaux, our other co-host. Hi, Jen.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. So Jen and I are in studio together without masks. We're fully vaccinated, and as we know, in the state of Illinois now, we're allowed to be in the same room together, so we're very grateful to be here with you. We have been focusing on these last couple months on what it means to have a culture of evangelization, and we gave an overview of that a few months ago. Last month, we talked about a culture of evangelization being very hospitable. Today, we're going to talk about listening and the importance of listening to the Holy Spirit, how the Holy Spirit is talking to you as a person, as a community, and about how we are listening to our churches, the people within, and then the community in which our parishes reside, so that we can listen to what the needs are. And so today we decided to take two demographics and focus in. So first up, we're going to talk about our youth today, this Generation Z that we don't know much about. And then later in the show, we're going to talk about women in the church, Catholic women. And so first up, we have Dr. Josh Packard from Springtide Research Institute. And Josh has spent his life, his adult life, really doing research in the sociology of religion. So welcome, Josh.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Excellent. Thanks for being here. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen, who, as many of you know, was a youth minister in her previous life, and I've asked her to sort of lead this conversation. Go ahead, Jen.
Thanks, Beth. I'm excited to talk with you, Josh, about this because, as Beth said, paying attention to youth is something that I've been doing pretty much since day one professionally. And I think a good place to start with this conversation is to find out who exactly is Gen Z. You know, we use these generational labels so often, but I think a lot of people don't follow perhaps the research as closely as some of us do. So could you tell us a little bit about who Gen Z is?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so at Springtide Research Institute, we focus all of our work on 13 to 25-year-olds, and that's about roughly what encapsulates Gen Z at this point. I mean, these labels are always a little bit fuzzy around the edges at the upper and lower ends, but for the most part, that's roughly the kind of the age range that we're thinking about here.
You know, in my youth ministry days, as Beth said many moons ago, I always heard people say that, you know, the youth are the ones that we really need to reach out to. We've got to be so worried about them. And everyone had ideas, you know, whether it was we're going to be offering that which would have reached them when they were your average youth, but also this idea of hyper relevancy and so forth. But one of the things I always appreciate is going to the research and really listening to the research, and why, particularly when people come with those other presumptions, why is it so important to listen to what the research actually tells us about Generation Z?
Well, I think it is critical that we listen to young people. I mean, that's really at the heart of our work, and but I think it's important that we listen and understand what they're saying in the context of their lives. You know, so on the one hand, we certainly want to honor and respect and hear those truths that young people are willing to share with us. But at the same time, we need to understand that they're coming from 14, 15, 16, year olds. And I think if there's like a big sort of fault, I think that we take as adults when we look at the data about young people is that we tend to do, which I think it's understandable, but it's just not the right thing, is that we tend to think that they're sort of static. So we get this snapshot picture of young people. And while we understand at, I think, a very real lived level from our own experiences as young people that the basic, like, the hallmark characteristic of being young is about being in flux. Everything is changing all the time. You're constantly exploring. You're trying to figure things out. You're navigating new spaces. For some reason, when we see a data point, we get really taken, we sort of get taken away by thinking like that's what they are. And I think we do this even more so with their religious lives, where it's like they either are or are not religious. You either have or haven't been confirmed, or you've been through the sacraments, you haven't been raised in the church, you don't, you attend or you don't. But the reality is far more complex. I mean, I think we need to start taking that same sort of nuance to that, that we understand that who a young person is dating at 16 is probably not who they're going to be dating at 18 or maybe even 16 and a half. What they go into college wanting to major in, if they're going to college, is not probably what they're going to graduate with in terms of their degree. We need to take that same sort of understanding and apply it to their faith lives. And when we do that, and that's a large part of how we try and position the data at Springtime, because when we do that, I think it lends itself to that Catholic model of accompaniment, where it's like, okay, this is where you are right now. I want to understand everything about why you're, in this position, why you're asking those questions, why you have these thoughts, and I want to check in with you in a week, in a month, in 6 months, in a year, and I want to be part of this conversation with you for the long haul, and not just assume that it's over because a young person is particularly convicted about any particular stance at any particular time.
Definitely. I know just from the experience, I was in youth ministry for about 12 years, and I've been away from it now for 6-7 years, something like that. And just seeing the differences in, first some of the pieces out of the National Study for Youth and Religion, now seeing your information, that there are such differences just in that relatively short span of time. In the process of your research and in listening to the youth, what were some of the particular findings that you got into that you think might be helpful for our listeners to hear?
Well, I think the number one thing, there's a couple of things to understand that are really important. So in the State of Religion and Young People 2020, we dug into this issue of affiliation. I mean, this is the number that everybody's sort of, really on red alert about, which is the nuns, N-O-N-E-S. And the high percentage of young people who don't affiliate or identify with a particular religion. Now, this, of course, is not new to Gen Z. This is just a continuation of a trend that's been going on now for 25 years, really, in earnest. Their number, with each successive generation, it just gets a little bit higher. What we were able to uncover, though, really importantly, is that for a long time, we've been using those markers of affiliated or unaffiliated really as proxies. To help us then assume a lot of things about that person. So if they're affiliated, we feel like we can reasonably assume something based on that identity about, do they read sacred texts? Do they engage in rituals like prayer? Do they attend, etc.? Do they believe in God? And if they're unaffiliated, similarly, we feel like we can assume a lot of things reasonably about those people. And that's just not true for young people anymore. There's a bigger, not bigger in terms of importance, but bigger in terms of broader story going on about institutional disengagement. That means that we're seeing as much diversity within those categories of affiliated and unaffiliated as we see between them. So unaffiliated people telling us that they're spiritual, affiliated people telling us that they have no trust in organized religion, both of them reading sacred texts. I mean, it's just a much messier landscape for Gen Z than I think it has been for previous generations, because this is all being filtered through this overarching lens of not wanting to be seen as being a part of any institution, because there's a lack of trust for all of them. So it's not just religion, but it's also, companies that they work for or that they might want to be, seen with, and it's nonprofits, and it's the government, and it's school. I mean, mistrust, is everywhere. And so I think that's a big thing to understand. Just because somebody is not in your pews, in other words, doesn't mean that they're not open to the conversation that you might be interested in having with them.
I think that's really helpful because, we do want to, I think, oversimplify things just to wrap our heads around it. And especially for people who may not be hands-on working with these youth, our parents sometimes have assumptions based off of just their particular child or children. And so this is such a great window into this. And I think it's fascinating that so much emphasis is put into, really digging in and listening to what the youth have to say about this. And what I am curious is that, you go into then starting to talk about the impact of what happens when these youth have adults who listen and that they're in relationship with. Could you share a little bit about what you found in regards to that adult-youth relationship?
Yeah, well, so for a long time, I think it was really effective for us to, when institutional trust was high, it made sense for us then to lean into those institutional bonds. Mm-hmm. And we would sort of, we would lead with our expertise, for lack of, to sort of sum it all up, whether it's our degree and credential or our position or our title or even how long we've been around in this role at this place. And that was often effective, enough to compel a young person or really anybody to listen to us, take us seriously, maybe even follow whatever advice we were giving or whatever teachings we were trying to impart. But I think that's where the big shift has been made. Expertise still matters, but it's not enough all by itself. We have to couple expertise with these other dimensions of what we call relational authority, which are listening, integrity, transparency, and care, along with expertise if what you really want to do is gain sort of long-term impact in the life of a young person. If you just do expertise without those other four things, what young people told us is that they see you as representing the interests of the institution, not having their best interests in mind. And again, they do not see the institution's interests and their interests as being sort of naturally aligned. That is where the burden of proof falls on the institution to prove that difference because they're skeptical of that alignment from the beginning.
I think that can be perhaps really challenging for so many people who have the best interests for the youth at hand and that are coming from a place of deep and abiding faith and want to share that with others, that we can sometimes think that our trust and our love for the institution carries over. So the next kind of feel I'd love to go into a little bit more is that idea of that relational authority that you spoke about. And I know that that was something that was a really fascinating piece because it does dig into, how do the youth actually feel like they're being listened to? Because I think that was one of the distinctions in it that really struck me. So I would love to dive into a little bit more of that and hear what some of those details were, but we're going to take a short break and return.
Well, if you were in the dark your whole life, could you tell what the light looks like? Can a blind man finally see the light? Well, I'm on my way. I can't get there on my own. And heaven's gate.
Do you have a gently used laptop or desktop computer that is gathering dust in your home? Consider donating to our Catholic Charities Veterans Computer Project. We will clean out your device, give it new software, and repurpose it for a veteran who is looking for employment. Your gift will make an incredible difference in a veteran's ability to find a job. Catholic Charities provides veteran services throughout Lake and suburban Cook counties, giving participants an array of professional and personal support. Our veterans have served our country, and it is our privilege to serve them. To learn more about Catholic Charities Veterans Services and the Veterans Computer Project, call 847-782-4219. That's 847-782-4219.
The Word Made Clear is exactly what its name implies. It's an easy-to-understand explanation of the Word of God, the Gospel. Hello, I'm Father James McElhone, Director of Biblical Formation for the Archdiocese of Chicago. I'd like to invite you to take our free online Bible study program by going to thewordmadeclear.org. Our website offers an audio-based guide to the Gospels of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. Listen to my lectures and follow along with the handouts provided. There are even discussion guides. You can also explore the biblical roots of the Mass. And there are links to a wide variety of biblical sources that will benefit both teachers and students of the sacred scriptures. Just go to wordmadeclear.org to experience our free online Bible study program. Again, it's free at wordmadeclear.org. It's the Word of God. Enjoy.
Caring adults make all the difference in the lives of adolescents. Catholic Charities understands this, and our mentorship program provides a free opportunity for youth living in Lake County to spend time, virtually, with volunteers who genuinely care about them. This program is ideal for youths age 9 to 12 who may need support navigating the challenges of childhood and early adolescence. Our amazing volunteers serve as friends and role models who help youth recognize their strengths and empower them to reach their full potential. Catholic Charities conducts a thorough background check on every volunteer, and our program coordinator closely monitors and supports each relationship. Mentoring is a fun after-school program that is totally different from remote learning. Virtual group sessions help youth enjoy fun activities with their peers, too. We're connecting youth with great role models. Join us today. To learn more, call 312-937-3375. That's 312-937-3375.
Welcome back to On the Way. I'm Beth White, one of your co-hosts this morning with Jen Delvaux, and this is from the Office for Evangelization and Missionary Discipleship. We are continuing our conversation with Dr. Josh Packard from Springtide Research. Go ahead, Jen.
Thanks. You know, one of the, I think, more terrifying numbers that I ran across when I was reading some of your research is that there's 69% of our Generation Z youth have fewer than 3 or less meaningful conversations a day, and that 40% feel they have no one to talk to and no one who knows them well. And, you know, when I think back to my youth ministry days and I had those adult volunteers, you know, if I would have read that at that point, I think that probably would have been even more heartbreaking than it is now. And I would have, you know, instantly started wondering what I was doing wrong. How can I do things better? But what happens when we start to work towards solving that? What impact did you start to see when youth felt they had adults who were listening to them and walking with them?
Yeah, it makes a huge impact. I mean, it's almost hard to overstate how important those relationships are. I mean, I'll toss out one more, which is about a third of young people have one or fewer adult in their life they could turn to if they needed to talk, and that includes their parents. And the magic number for, you know, that we would really be trying to get to is 5. I mean, it's not an unattainable number, but if we can get young people connected to 5 adults in their lives that they feel like they can turn to, then they're far better off. Now, what we mean by far better off is like there's a whole host of sort of risk factor things that go down. So their stress levels go down, their feelings of isolation and loneliness go down, their interest in and engagement in destructive behaviors goes down, but also there's a bunch of pro-social behaviors that we see going up. So we see higher graduation rates when we see a greater sense of belonging in community. We see less substance abuse, fewer unwanted pregnancies, et cetera. And it's really hard to overstate the importance of those things, not just for the general health and humanity of young people, which I think we all care about, but also when it comes to their spiritual lives. So it's, we've all seen it with young people that you can sort of make these, often make these sort of really intense short-term gains because, as young people get excited about things, as they do, they'll make commitments that are often hard to sustain. They'll start new practices that fall away. And we know, though, that it's ultimately, for the long haul, for a really durable sense of faith, it's belonging that needs to come before believing. Because it's the community that will draw you back to those things. Of course, again, a young person's life is all about change and exploration, and that's going to happen. You're never going to, you shouldn't even be trying to stop that. You should just try and, you should try and be there with them for those moments. But if what we're hoping to impart to young people is a sense of ongoing commitment, then it's the community that's going to help guide those things. So we really shouldn't be putting the cart before the horse and thinking like, hey, I need to explain everything here. Right. I need to catechize you, to to use a Catholic term, and then, we can be like, all right, we're done with that and move on to the next thing. We really have to be building that sense of community around that at the same time. And that starts with, for a lot of young people, it starts with connecting them in the places where they're not currently connected, and that's often with adults who care about them.
Josh, I just want to ask quickly, the instinct a lot of times that we hear is, let's just get a really great youth ministry going. Let's get, all the kids together. Tell us, and I think you're alluding to it, but I want to be very explicit about this. What is the importance of intergenerational community for young people?
Well, their peers are important.
Yeah.
And when we talk about youth ministry, though, I think we need to be rethinking a little bit about what we think of as youth ministry. So, look, in a world where there's high levels of institutional trust and there's a willingness to sort of generally accept that institutions have your best interest in mind, I think those program-driven youth ministry models that we saw flourishing, in the 80s and 90s when I was growing up, those were really effective. I don't think they were ill-formed or a bad idea. But when the world changes, we need to change our methods with it. And it doesn't mean we change our core beliefs. Young people were very clear in the data that they're not asking you to compromise on those. But I do think we have to change some of our methods. I mean, look, Blockbuster was one of the greatest things on earth when I was a kid. You could go and rent any movie you wanted just by taking a short drive. But now, that is antiquated and irrelevant, and we don't deliver movies in the same way to people, even though they're just as interested in movies as they ever were. In fact, maybe more so. And I think it's the same thing here. Those program-driven things weren't bad. They're just not as effective now in this current context as they once were. And so we really need to be innovating and digging into relationships as the model, for engaging with young people and moving forward. And that's going to be hard to do because, look, I haven't met a single religious leader, youth minister, campus pastor, whatever, who isn't working hard enough. They all care. They're all working really hard. Asking somebody to sort of do relational ministry that I think the data are very clear about saying is so necessary is going to require giving up something. I don't think we can just do this on top of the things that we're already doing, because who's got the time for that? Right. Who's got the energy for that? Who's got the money for that, frankly? So it is going to require, a bit of a shift in the way that we're doing things if you take these data really seriously, and if you dig into both a little bit about, we've got belonging and the state of religion in young people and some other things I think really speak to this very clearly, that these relationships are the thing that are going to sustain young people. And it's going to be, they're going to find those relationships to guide them one way or another, but that is going to be their source of guidance, whether that's with you or with somebody else.
I think one of the things that really struck me was that number 5 as the number that was sort of that tipping point. And, the reality is, particularly if you're in, one of those large suburban parishes, the sheer ratio of the youth minister or even the youth minister and their team to all those youth in the parish, right there, basic math is going to tell you that you can't rely on just that group, that this all of a sudden really does become the entire community's responsibility. And I think one of the things that we really focus on is creating that entire culture of evangelization. You've touched a lot on that need for belonging, and that, we say we need to form all of the adults in the community to be those missionary disciples. And when I look at this research and I look at what we're trying to do for the adults, I see hope, because there is hopefully that opportunity to have more of these adults who then can have that conversation when they do see that youth showing up at Mass, or maybe they see, standing in line at the local coffee shop, or, their neighbor, that all of a sudden the number of potential adults becomes exponentially larger to reach the youth in the broader community. But I think that can be intimidating, because you think, I have to have all of the answers, or I have to be the perfect Catholic, or these are the things I have to be. The number of things on that list that I heard from people who I would try to recruit for helping out with youth ministry would always astound me. But when you dove into what the youth were actually looking for from those adults, what were some of the things that the research showed you as you listened to what the Gen Z had to say?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me just sort of de-intimidate that a little bit if I can. So the magic number is 5 for young people, but we see gains at every step. So 2 is better than 1, 3 is better than 2. And there's nobody suggesting that like your parish or your church has to be the answer for all 5 of those connections. I mean, even if we can just get 1 or 2 in your congregation to add to the other connections that young people likely have, then, we're making really good progress there. Additionally, to get to your question about like, what is, what are young people looking for from those relationships with adults? Well, in short, they're not looking for perfection. And in fact, they're skeptical of perfection. So, when we talk about those dimensions of listening, integrity, transparency, and care, what they're really looking for in those 4 elements is, an adult who's willing to take them seriously, to listen to them, not to condone everything that they're doing. They're not looking, they know when they've done wrong. Generally, they know what they should be doing. So, I think as adults, we often get, it can be really difficult to sit and listen to a young person as they tell us about all the really, poor decisions they're making. In many cases, I was a professor for a long time, and I would have students sit around my, in my office across the desk from me, and they would tell me, what they were thinking about. And I just so wanted to jump in and be like, don't do that. Like, that's a really bad idea. Don't date that person, or like, you need to get out of that job. But they already knew those things. They didn't need me to tell them those things. And in fact, they weren't going to listen to me tell them those things until they felt like I had listened to their full story. And that is just I know how hard it is to sit there and not say something. And especially in a religious context where we often feel like not stepping in might give the impression that we're okay with everything that they're doing. But young people were clear, like, they do not see that as permission giving. This is more like, it's almost like a litmus test of like, are you willing, are you willing to understand me? Are you willing to understand how I made these decisions, and are you willing to dig in? And I think one of the, you can see this, one young person told us in our podcast, The Voices of Young People, they said, look, the dominant experience of young people when it comes to adults is of being dismissed. We're just disregarded. And you see that when you ask a young person a question about their lives. So the question for me as a professor was always, what do you want to do when you graduate? And you get this very perfunctory response. And it often takes like 2 or sometimes 3 follow-up questions. Tell me more about that. Why are you interested in that? Have you thought about other things? And if so, what were they? Before they begin to realize that you're serious. You are actually interested in them, because, when they think you don't care, the goal is just to get out of that conversation as quickly as possible. I think you're just doing your job or being polite or something like that. But when they find out that you do care and that you're listening attentively, and in many cases for me, it was even taking notes, asking questions about previous conversations, following up on those things, you get a whole different kind of relationship. They reveal all kinds of different things, and it opens up the door for us to then bring our expertise, whether that's knowledge that we gained from a degree that we have, or whether it's lived experience expertise, or if it's an insight that we have because we've worked in an organization for a particular period of time, then we start to see those pathways open up where that expertise can come in. But if we just come and front load the expertise part without doing, the care part, the integrity part, the transparency part, it's just not going to be heard.
Thank you so much, Josh. Could you share with us a little bit about where our listeners could get some information, some of the research that you shared? We'll include some links, but if someone's just listening in their car right now, where is somewhere they can go to learn more about your research?
Absolutely. So we're at springtideresearch.org. You can find the State of Religion, which we do every fall. The first one came out last year. It's State of Religion and Young People 2020 about relational authority. And there's even, thanks to a generous Family Foundation gift, that is free in digital form. Excellent. And even a special Catholic edition of that report that just breaks out the Catholic data that you can also find on our website.
Excellent. Thank you. And I will tell you that I really have leaned into the young people in my life based on your research and really listened to them and had conversations. No, really, my niece and others. So thank you so much for your time this morning, Josh.
Thank you.
Can a blind man finally see the light? Well, if you were in the dark your whole life, could you tell what the light looks like? Can a blind man finally see the light? a dead man come back to life?
The cemetery ministry is a core ministry of our Catholic faith tied to the corporal works of mercy. It's comforting to know that our Catholic cemeteries are caring for the remains of our loved ones awaiting the resurrection. There are 44 Archdiocese of Chicago Catholic cemeteries willing to help you in your time of loss. Call 708-449-6100 or visit CatholicCemeteriesChicago.org. Catholic Cemeteries, serving the Catholic community since 1837.
Catholic Charities Schreiber Center for Human Services is now open in Round Lake. Due to the pandemic, we are limited in the number of in-person programs that we currently can provide. However, a food pantry is open twice a week and a Wednesday night supper is held with to-go meals every week. A wide range of senior services are now offered as well. If we can assist you or someone you know, please call us at 847-546-5733. That's 847-546-5733. Before, during, and after COVID-19, Catholic Charities is here for you.
You're listening to Catholic Chicago on WNDZ 750 AM. Every Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., the Archdiocese of Chicago presents programming about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Thanks for letting us be part of your morning. Now again, Catholic Chicago.
Hi, welcome back to On the Way. I'm Beth White, your co-host this morning, along with Jen Delvaux, and we're here in studio talking about one of the elements of a culture of evangelization, which is critical, which is listening to how the Holy Spirit is working in your lives and in the lives of others, listening to your church, listening to the community around you, listening to the needs, and then responding to those clearly. But the importance of not just having all the answers, but literally listening. And so next up, we have Kerry Weber, who is a executive editor of America Magazine. Sorry, I'm cheating with my notes here. Good morning, Kerry.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us. So when I started my job just a little bit about 5 years ago, I noticed some statistics out there that showed that there were a decline of women in the church. And I found that very fascinating. And 5 years later, that decline is increasing rapidly. So I looked at a statistic recently and it said 69% of the church in 2016 was made up of women, and now it's about 50% of the church. The decline is happening pretty rapidly. And so I know that's not the reason why you potentially undertook, but I was looking around for some research on Catholic women, and I ran across the America Magazine undertaking of interviewing Catholic women all over the country. So I wondered if we could just talk a little bit about this study and the purpose of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the study started because I was doing something like what you were describing, which is looking around for statistics about Catholic women. And I was writing an editorial at the time. It was an opinion piece, and I started to write things like, Catholic women think X or Y. Right. And then I realized that I had no data to back that up. So I said, all right, I'm going to go and find some. And then I couldn't find a lot of comprehensive data on this. Women were surveyed as part of larger surveys that interviewed both men and women, but were rarely the focus of that questioning. So I went to Father Matt Malone, our editor-in-chief at American. I said, "Can we do this survey?" And he said, "Sure, yeah, let's go for it." So, we wanted Catholic women to be able to actually tell us what they thought, rather than us sort of
assuming,
just guessing or projecting our own thoughts onto large groups of people. So we wanted it to be comprehensive. We spoke to over 1,500 Catholic women through these surveys, and they answered their questions online. And Mark Gray said, he is over at Cara, he's works with their data there, said that often that means that people are more likely to give honest answers when they're answering some of these survey questions online. So we, because there's not that sort of, I guess, guilt or shame associated with answering questions. If you think, oh, I don't want to tell someone how often I go to Mass, I'm going to, pad this a little bit. So it was an interesting study, we thought, to find out that information, to find out what people, what women think, and to then hopefully apply that information to make our church a better place for men and women.
So, Kerry, one of the interesting things, I saw a Post article where there was a lot of negative feedback about how you defined Catholic women. So, could you share with our listeners how you defined Catholic women?
Yeah, sure. So, for statistical purposes, the question we asked women were, "Are you Catholic?" And if they said yes, we then asked them the other questions, and we being the survey gathering company on our behalf. But that is the qualification for being Catholic here, and theologically, the qualification is baptism, right? It leaves an indelible mark on us, and so women were self-identified as Catholic, and we got a lot of reactions saying that the only answers that should matter are the ones that of the women who went to Mass weekly. Those are the quote-unquote real Catholics. But I found this to be a pretty problematic response because, absolutely there's value in looking specifically at the data of the subset of those women surveyed. But if we venture into the territory of trying to rate people's Catholicism, I don't think it's particularly useful for surveys or for evangelization.
No.
Many of these women, maybe they don't go to Mass each week, but something about their faith has stuck with them to the point that they will identify as Catholic in like a random survey where no one's, going to judge them one way or the other. They still consider this enough of their identity. And it's our job to bring them closer to the center of the faith and not push them further to the margins by saying, oh, your voice doesn't count in this survey.
So that was interesting. Just over 50% or just under, it was around 50-50, attend Mass regularly, which is weekly or more, right? And then it became less than that. But what was fascinating is that 96%-ish, 94% indicated that they believe in God, with only about 16% saying they have some doubts sometimes. So the overwhelming number of these women believe in God, even if they're not at Mass, and they also have a pretty strong rate of prayer. Did that surprise you?
That they believed in God even though they didn't go to Mass?
Yeah, well, that they actually believed in God, so there was no doubts. That's not why they weren't there. And they also have an active prayer life, it seems, even though they're not affiliated with a particular church, attending Mass.
Yeah, no, in some ways that did not surprise me because I know a lot of people who, identify as Catholic but have felt alienated by one part of the church or another, or have a faith in God, but have become a little bit apathetic about what the church itself has to offer them. I see this happening anecdotally, so it didn't really surprise me at the same way to see that sort of show up in the data. A lot of women that I spoke to described the Catholic Church as their home, and in the sense that you can't change where you're from. It's almost like a hometown. This is where we're from, and a lot of people have complicated relationships with the places they're from, but you can't change it. That's it. This is part of who they are, and I think that's also why women often spoke of feeling hurt or rejected or disappointed by the church and why that hurts so much, because it is this sort of real sense of identity and, you know, where they're from. Another statistic that I found really helpful to put this in context is that 79% of the Catholic women we talked to said that helping the poor was somewhat or very much important to their faith, and receiving the Eucharist was somewhat or very much important to their faith. For the Eucharist, it was 69%. Now, these numbers are maybe lower than we would like to see. You know, these are important parts of our faith. We'd love everyone to say 100%. This is very important. But most women surveyed seem to kind of get the gist of what the church values and what the gospel asks of us. And so they are, as you say, not like totally alienated from the church, but maybe don't quite see what the parish life or what the institutional church has to offer. And that's where I think, you know, we can do a lot of work, because if 45% of women feel that the Eucharist is very important to being Catholic, but only 24% of women are actually showing up weekly to receive it, we have to ask ourselves, you know, what is keeping them away?
Right. I found what was interesting as well is that there were very few in this list. They're self-identified, so they said they were Catholic, so that's at the gate. But very few had ever thought about leaving the Catholic Church and going somewhere else. I think that's interesting how you said home, that they feel like this is their hometown and where they're from. But they must not have a sense, many of these women who do not participate regularly, do you think they lack a sense of belonging and an inclusion? Is that part of what you think is happening, where they feel sort of rejected?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Some people spoke about, you know, having been specifically, you know, alienated by either a church teaching or a particular parish or something, some personal experience. But I think actually the overall sense that we got from the data was it was less that people were offended and more that they were having trouble finding the institutional church as relevant to their lives. And I think, you know, they overall nearly among Catholics less involved in parish life, you know, 44% were not very likely to speak to anyone else about their faith. They just sort of had it in like this personal sense. They didn't really have someone to talk to. Only about half the women we spoke to felt comfortable, you know, talking to a family member about their faith. So I think that a lot of times people, women have sort of a personal sense of faith, but have, for one reason or other, not necessarily connected with that larger community. And, you know, it's hard to put a single answer on that. But I know some women spoke of not really being able to see or imagine a role model of in the church, sort of in a physical day-to-day life of like, what does it look like to be a woman in the church? You know, there are saints, and there is a history of great women in the church, but on a day-to-day basis, people who were less involved in the church were less likely to know about women in the church. And so it became like this sort of vicious cycle where if you're not going to Mass, you don't see maybe the women who are actively involved in making a parish happen, and you feel like maybe there's no place for you. And that's where bringing people in, literally just in the door sometimes, can help, because they can see the way in which women are in fact involved.
So we're going to continue our conversation after the break, Kerry, and I want to talk a little bit about what some things that you gleaned from this could be of benefit for us in the world of evangelization.
Sure. So from speaking to a lot of the women, I did a follow-up story with some interviews with one woman who was actually in the survey, and then a number of other women nationally in the church. And from these interviews, I got the sense that a deliberate mentoring of Catholic women as professionals, either in their own professional life or particularly in the church, would be very helpful to people because of the sort of disconnect that I mentioned before. This sense that they didn't have anyone to talk to about their faith life, and this sense that, if you want to be involved in the church, you can be involved in it personally, you can be involved in it at the parish level, but you can also be involved in it professionally. These days, women have a good number of options, most of the time, many women do, of where they want to work, and a lot of other secular outlets look like they have a lot more room for growth than a lot of places in the church. And I think a lot of the women that I spoke to in the church often do a lot of work behind the scenes, but they're also in very strong leadership roles in a lot of ways, like, a chancellor of a diocese or something. But no one ever sees this person doing their work at the parish level on most Sundays. So I think often being willing to embrace sort of being a role model. A lot of the women I spoke to were very humble and sort of like, oh, I'm not a role model. I'm just doing my job. I'm just working in the church. But that means a lot to a lot of people. And to see that and draw hope from it, even if you don't want to follow that lead professionally, I think is really useful. I think also just leading in offering women who are working in the church or want to work in the church the chance to have a living wage and parental leave, things that make it possible. I know a lot of people who want to work for the church. They work for the church for a while, but then if they have a kid, it becomes too costly to do so, or too difficult if they don't get leave or they aren't being paid a fair wage. I also think just the sacraments are a place where a lot of people who are sort of tangentially associated with the church might have the opportunity to reconnect with the church. And so taking these sacraments seriously and making sure people are doing them deliberately, but without making them examples of red tape and obstacles that sort of turn people away after having not had much contact with the church. They go away with feeling like all the church is filling out forms and red tape to get your kid baptized or to get married. I think we have to look at these sacraments where people are coming back to the church often for the first time in a while as places for evangelization, as places to say, hey, once you do this, we have a lot of other ways to keep connecting with you. Let's stay in touch. Let's work on that. And I think just trying to make people feel at home. People feel like this is their home. They want to feel comfortable there. And it doesn't mean being complacent. It doesn't mean that we can't correct each other's mistakes or help each other along. But it does mean we have to make sure that when we talk to people about their feelings about the faith, we can't say what you feel doesn't matter, right? Like, people's emotions are real, and we have to help people put their, pain in context that the church may have caused, or help people to understand why the church is relevant in their life. I think I know a lot of people who are searching for a lot of what the church offers, but for one reason or another don't realize that they can find that in the church. And so just being able to have sort of frank, open conversations with women and allowing women to speak their own voices and say what they're looking for, I think is just a good start to getting people involved.
So the importance really is then asking them what they need and listening. I know sometimes we don't even think about as church that we should have babysitting if we're going to expect young women, young mothers to participate in things and things like that. So we're going to take a break right now. We'll be right back to continue on our conversation with Kerry Weber.
Caring adults make all the difference in the lives of adolescents. Catholic Charities understands this, and our mentorship program provides a free opportunity for youth living in Lake County to spend time, virtually, with volunteers who genuinely care about them. This program is ideal for youths age 9 to 12 who may need support navigating the challenges of childhood and early adolescence. Our amazing volunteers serve as friends and role models who help youth recognize their strengths and empower them to reach their full potential. Catholic Charities conducts a thorough background check on every volunteer, and our program coordinator closely monitors and supports each relationship. Mentoring is a fun after-school program that is totally different from remote learning. Virtual group sessions help youth enjoy fun activities with their peers, too. We're connecting youth with great role models. Join us today. To learn more, call 312-937-3375. That's 312-937-3375.
Hey, it's Timothy Johnston here from Liturgy Training Publications. Over the past few months, I'm sure you've found yourself at home more, whether it's working from home or watching live stream masses on Sunday mornings. As we began adjusting to this at the beginning of the pandemic, one of the things I missed the most was gathering with friends at the parish. That's why we at LTP have created this new virtual gathering series called Living the Sunday Word. We meet virtually on Thursday evenings each week and reflect on the upcoming Sunday readings. And with that, we share stories to help us more fully reflect on the Word of God. I'm inviting each of you to join us, a group of friends meeting virtually from all parts of the country. So visit ltp.org for more information and to register. You won't want to miss this.
Welcome back to On the Way. I am Beth White, your co-host this morning with Jen Delvaux. And we are continuing our conversation about the importance of listening. And we are talking to Kerry Weber, who is an executive editor of America Magazine. And in 2018, America Magazine undertook a pretty comprehensive study of Catholic women, about 1,500 Catholic women. And you can Google through America Magazine and look for the Catholic Woman Study, and you can get a PDF of that through the CARA, right, Kerry? Where you can actually see the data itself and get an understanding of some of the background here. So we were talking a little bit before the break about what we can learn from this in terms of evangelization and how to help women connect. And so one of the things from some of the other studies that I've read, Kerry, is that part of it is women are just seem to be way busier today than they have been in previous generations, balancing a job, home, all the activities perhaps with their children are undertaking. And church, while is lovely, because it's interesting, because you said sometimes it's very personal, because it's for them, sometimes it gets lost because it's not a part of the community, it's not a part of their family necessarily. Do you have any thoughts about that at all? About how women get sort of disconnected from church and community because of their busyness?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very easy as a parent to put yourself last. And if this is something that you find fulfilling, but you have a million other things to do, it's easy to say, well, I got to deal, with these things first. But I think that ideally, this is something that is the basis of everything we do. And it's something that benefits our family in the long run, because it introduces the faith to our children, to our partners. And it is something that really is foundational and needs to be made a priority. Now, I mean, I say this because I know this intellectually. I also emotionally have a hard time, focusing sometimes at Mass because, there's 3 toddlers crawling on me or something. And so sometimes I think it can be easier not to show up, particularly if you don't feel particularly welcome when you bring the kids or something like that. But ideally, it's not just a personal thing, right? That it's something that we have, our own relationship with God, but that means that we should be in relationship with one another, and that those relationships should help to build us up, and maybe even give us the energy to do more than we thought we could do, or to just have the peace of mind and the calm and a sense of purpose and calmness to do just the things in front of us that day. It's really hard. I know it is, but I also know in my heart that if I don't do it, if I find that I, kind of keep prayer to myself and don't connect it to that wider community, I feel sort of drained in a different way. It's a different kind of being drained of that sense of connection, of that sense of the body of Christ, right? It's not just us. We're all part of this larger community, and the whole point is to work together. And sometimes it makes life easier, and sometimes it makes life harder. But I think in general, it's meant to make our lives more meaningful and more fulfilling. And so if we can find the time to do that, I think it's usually worth the effort.
Yeah. So I Jen and I talk a lot about these things, and I found this, the fight or flight, that was all based sort of on the maleness, and that for women, we tend to tend and befriend in times of stress, that we will take care of those around us, and we need to befriend others in order to sort of, it's not fight or flight, it's actually that tend and befriend. And I just imagine that our spaces, sometimes the tending of what our children need get overtaken by the befriending, and seeing that our churches and our communities could be places where women can connect with other women. I also think one of the issues, Kerry, is that our young people are delaying childbirth. And so sometimes they walk into parishes and there isn't a role for them if they're not a mom or a grandma or something like that. And so finding ways. Did you see any of that in your research?
Related to
finding ways
and the age
to connect women at a younger
and the
age.
Engagement there?
Yeah.
We didn't see that very much. We did see the sort of sense that people didn't have anyone to sort of reach out to and talk to, as I mentioned, about their faith, and I think that was across the board. We saw that young people overwhelmingly wanted to be married in the church anyway, so that there was, for people who did not have kids yet, or maybe had kids but were in a relationship as a younger person, we're looking to kind of formalize that relationship within the church, right? And to do that, and I think that means something, right?
Yeah,
that it means
does.
that even though people are like disconnecting in other ways, they still see this as a place that could welcome them in that stage of their life. But as you said before that, it's, I think, a lot harder sometimes for people to see that, for people to kind of understand where their place is. And I think that's where we need to make sure that our ministries are just good for people in general, like that, and that we don't necessarily have. I think there's some people who would be attracted by a young adult ministry and would want to join that, and then there might be some young adults who just want to join the food pantry ministry or the rosary group or something like that. And so I think that's where the importance of an invitation is really helpful. I know a lot of people who said that they have attend parish and no one spoke to them.
We're going to have to wrap up our conversation. Our time is up, believe it or not. I'm so sorry.
Right.
So thank you so much for your time and for all of your wisdom. We appreciate it. Thank you so much, Kerry.
Thanks for having me on.
Join us every Monday through Friday at this time for Catholic Chicago. You can stream our programs live or listen to past programs by visiting our website, archchicago.org, and clicking on Radio TV. And please connect with Catholic Chicago on social media.
Well, I'm